But we are going to dive in to what we, as Northern Californians, experienced last night.
Right.
Whether you were on the road during the protests, I'm not sure what you were doing. I was at home getting ready to go to bed.
I was already in bed watching from my phone.
So, and everyone was watching from different aspects, right? Some people are watching on television like I was. You were watching probably from your phone?
Yep, I was literally following Frances Wang's Twitter feed.
Twitter feed.
That's
and then you were watching from... You were stuck on the freeway.
I got an alert on my phone from ABC 10 saying 5 is shut down. And right there, sitting in traffic for like 40 minutes and watching people out of their cars, just standing on the interstate. The bus behind me actually let people off. They were like, all right, let them off. And so some people wanted to talk about it, you know, out in traffic, and other people were very guarded. And
is this your video right here?
This is my video, yes. So you can kind of see people turning around right there. And then later, about 40 minutes later, we had the police in the chopper, saying, get back in your car. We are going to open, over the loudspeaker, we are going to open traffic. And then police coming to the side, move to the right. So it was kind of intense because people, was it going to be a protest? Was it going to be something more? That's what we were asking because we were right there.
And we know it was
I don't think we told them what it is. That happened.
Right, well, everyone here in Northern California, I mean, it's unless you've been living under a rock, you know what the heck is going on. There are protests all because of what happened to Stephon Clark on Sunday. We know that he was gunned down by Sac PD, 20 shots, and he is a dead man this morning. And what everyone's talking about is that it's another black man who was unarmed and killed by police. And so we mentioned Frances Wang because you were watching the whole Twitter feed. Yes. She was there on the ground in the protest yesterday trying to gather information as to what was going on. And we're going to roll her video. Okay.
So she embedded herself.
Stephan Clark! Stephan Clark! Stephan Clark!
An emotional older brother speaking to protesters who are all here for Stephan Clark. After about 6 hours of protesting, crowds dispersed from the Golden One Center. But this is where it all began, Sacramento City Hall. Protesters angry and frustrated, demanding more from their police officers. After marching around the building and down the blocks, protesters decided to turn the rally into a full-on march, shutting down the streets of downtown Sacramento. The original goal was just the freeway intersection, but hundreds soon made their way onto the freeway itself, shutting down I-5. Protesters spent the rest of the night at the Golden One Center, also shutting down the arena for those who weren't already inside the Kings game. Community activist Barry Axia says this is why.
So what we're going to do is make them go back to their public officials and say, stop killing black people. That's why we're not allowing no one to get in the game.
Do you think this will bring about the change that is needed?
You know what? I do know one thing. They're going to look at us with a lot more respect and understand that we have the power to shut down this city. If this city does not comply and start doing the right things that they said.
Country, the experience and the relationship between his community and police force is very different than my experience has been, than your experience has been. So go ahead.
So Frances was also tweeting out video from Stephan's brother and cousin who were leading a lot of the chants right there in the middle of the crowd. And I thought, wow, number one, incredible that she can get that experience to our viewers. But two, how strong they must be to stand up in a moment when they're grieving to promote this sort of change in conversation in the community. That is incredible to me.
And the fact that no arrests were made, which is a positive
completely
thing.
safe.
The minute it started, and there was one point, this is when they were in front of the Golden One Center, because I was watching it live on television. There was one point where it started to get a little wild, and I just saw it was police officers going in, some people are getting rowdy. You see some people standing on an area of the platform about probably 15 feet from the ground where you go, uh-oh, you don't want anything bad to happen because then that overtakes the message, right? Yeah. And so I'm just praying, going, gosh,
crossing your fingers.
Crossing my fingers that nothing bad happens. But when you get a group of passionate people together, you know, passion. I was watching one live interview and this gentleman was trying to express himself, but he is so angry that he cussed on live television. And so they had a, oh no, we can't do that. Right. And he was immediately like, I'm sorry. Like, he didn't want that. It came out. Right. For the most part, it seemed, of course, if you're a fan and you aren't of this of this race, right? And you're not part of the experience, then you're going, gosh, why are they inconveniencing me when I've paid money to get into the Golden One Center? And like the gentleman said, you heard him, we have been inconvenienced our entire lives. So this is our moment. Let us have this moment.
I'll say this, though. Sacramento is one of the most diverse cities in this nation. That's number one. Number two, that protest yesterday was incredibly diverse. Looking out just through Instagram and Twitter, there were a sea of many colors. And the tweets that I saw coming in were saying, hey, I'm white, or I'm this, and I'm here for Stephan, and I'm saying his name, and I'm recognizing him. And there have been lots of conversations over the last couple of days about how this isn't a race issue, but it is. Like, there's no denying it is a race issue. This isn't happening to every minority. This isn't happening to all people. This is happening to one subset of people. And so I think it's exciting and interesting that our city is rallying behind Stephan and his family. Of course, not knowing exactly what happened. We won't have all of those details from the police for a few more days or weeks, but it's exciting to see the spirit that came together last night.
Ezekiel and Bernice Butcher, we are sick of our children and family getting killed for nothing. Alicia Sandoval Gomez, these are people commenting right now in our comment section saying rest in peace, of course, to Stephon Clark. We have Deborah L. Diggs who says, I was there, hashtag justice for Stephan. Robert saying rest in peace. And Ralphie Rashad Reed, they need to be in jail. Not sure if he's talking about the police officers or the people who were there protesting last night. If you can clarify for us, Rafi. Ezekiel and Bernice Butcher say, I stand with them. Good morning, Carlos. Ralphie also says they murdered him. Peaceful public protests are good for society. People need their cry to be heard, says Joseph Barnett.
I don't know if it's just my age and coming into a new decade of my life, but I have seen more protests in my lifetime than I feel like so many people.
Protest everything.
Exclusive of Vietnam survivors. But I have seen so many protests, and it's made me such an excited, active contributor to our community. And can you imagine, they're calling this generation of students, what is it? The school shooting generation. I think they should be called the let's make stuff happen generation.
Yeah, we talked
let's get the conversation started.
We talked to the woman behind. She's a young girl, 17 years old. We know her name is Emily Stone, and she is the organizer behind a protest that's happening tomorrow. And it's a nationwide initiative by the survivors of the Florida school shooting. But a local girl, 17 years old, is putting on the march at 10 o'clock at the Capitol for her peers and for anyone of any age group to stand with those and protect our nation and want to push for tighter gun laws in our country. And so she said that same thing when I asked her that question. You guys are being deemed by Time Magazine as the school shooting generation. How does that sit with you? And her response was, we don't want to be that. We want to be the generation that stops school shootings from happening. But of course, everyone from media to people, they want to be able to categorize. They want to be able to, how do you label them? How do you label them? So right now, that is what they are, because that's what they've gone through. So when we start to see changes happening because of their voices being heard, then I think that will shift. And I think it will happen. I mean, these are resilient young people. And I see them standing up to these adults. And not to say, yes, they are young, 18 years old, 17 years old. But just like last night, going back to what this protest was about, there were a lot of young people out there.
I'll say this. I have heard a lot of people say, and just like you did, they're young, but... And I hope that we're able to change the way that we speak about young people to say, they're young and
that's a good point.
They did this, they're doing that, because you don't want to say, in spite of their age, they are so wise.
Right.
We are creating these humans that are amazing and able to create so much change, and it's exciting. It's so exciting.
But in that same note, as someone who comes from a family of educators, right, people who are in the school system, when they have young people, sometimes you give any age group too much power, you don't want to start seeing it being abused. And that's all I'm saying, is that you say they're young because they haven't gone through the life experiences that a 50-year-old person has. Not to say that that's a bad thing.
They have been through school shootings.
I'm just saying they are still young people. They're called young for a reason. They are young. And that's okay for them to be young and vivacious. But they also, if they have the right adults with the right mindset in them, then they can help guide them. You're raising young people right now.
I think that you could be qualified and you could be considered an expert or qualified if that's your life experience. So kids going to school these days have gone through this era of school shootings, so they perhaps have a more informed experience about what that's like versus, say, an older generation that really didn't have that happening. So, but young people could not speak to what it's like to be married and and all these other things as, say, an older generation, or
being respectful of each other's age.
Or going through a draft, through war, or what have you. Younger kids cannot say that because we haven't had the draft since Vietnam. So, just consider your role in life and what you've been through, and you can speak with authority on those things.
Exactly.
So I think that even though they are young, in particular for the school shooting era that we've been going through for the past several decades, I think that they can speak with authority because this is their daily life.
Totally.
They're the ones that all of a sudden have a metal detector show up at their school. And
clear backpacks.
And I saw this article the other day that was saying, you know what? It's the victims of school shootings. You have to broaden your scope in how you think about this because they're the ones that are shot, injured, and killed. But there's everybody else in the school that will have this complete horrific experience of running for their lives.
PTSD.
Let's just say you're in junior high, your sibling goes to high school that had a school shooting. They come home, that experience is now in the family, along with mom and dad and what they went through. So when we look at, they've been talking about school shootings recently, and there's been all this back and forth of, well, this was a shooting at a school, but it was really between two people.
It happened in a parking lot.
Yeah, it happened in a parking lot. It was off campus. I understand you're trying to categorize how this all went down, but it's basically gun violence, young people involved in some way, shape, or form around a school, and they're the exponential number of victims related to this because it's their experience. Oh my gosh, this happened at my school.
Right.
Or, oh my gosh, my older brother was at that school. It could have been him. The sibling who wasn't even there all of a sudden has all these feelings of guilt and anxiety and everything else. So what you see for the stats that get passed around on Facebook, whether they're precisely accurate or not, just know the number of people involved in this discussion directly and almost directly, right, is so much larger than you think. So there really is so many more people that are involved in this whole discussion that have a direct experience related to school shootings.
And I think that was really well said.
And as a parent, too, just raising your child to be an independent thinker, that means you are able to ask questions. You still want to respect authority. But last night on I-5, my take, just moving to Sacramento, was I am on the interstate. I'm listening to you. I know that you're hurting. So it wasn't like I'm not going to get home in time for dinner. It was I'm listening to you, and I saw both sides. I saw protesters, and I saw police officers. And so my thought was making sure everybody was safe because the police officers were on the interstates, like guiding us in traffic and in full gear. Some people were throwing stuff. So it was active, but I think the most important is to be an independent thinker. I was raised not to ask questions to authority.
Interesting.
And that's different.
Okay, that is different.
And what's different, too, is how Rebecca Hardy felt. And she said, don't block the freeway. People are trying to go to work. People are on their way to the ER, transplant, waiting to get to donor. So she had more of a concern of those sort of things when it happened because, again, speaking to the tone of inconvenience, I get your story, but get mine, too. I'm dying right now. I need to get to the ER. Not to say that's everyone's experience, but she brings up a good point.
Someone who also can relate to both sides, I think that's Daniel Hahn. That's our police chief. And he made it super clear. The shot that we played this morning on our show, I don't know if we have access to it, but Chrissy, if we do, I'd love to let them hear it. It was just so clear to me that he is in the middle of a rock and a hard place. He is the chief of police. He knows that regulations need to be followed. He knows that all eyes are on him as the first black chief of police in this town. And so the way he's handled this, releasing the footage so quickly, making sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, that is going to set the tone for, hopefully this doesn't happen again, but if it were to happen again, he is going to set the bar for how it should be handled. I guarantee that.
Do we have a clip from him that we can run right now? Okay, let's go ahead and play it.
Emotions are high and people are angry and they want answers, and we intend to give it to them. People can see that we're being transparent, we're being open, we're an open book, and we will reveal facts as we get them. That still doesn't erase what happened, and it still doesn't answer the questions whether it was legal within policy and within training. But I think that's a step in the right direction, because if this whole thing had happened a year ago or 2 years ago, you wouldn't even have video to see because we didn't have body cameras and we weren't releasing video because we didn't have any video. It's been some long days, but our city is hurting. So anytime, this is where I was born and raised, so anytime our city is hurting, I'm hurting. And so you can't go anywhere right now without feeling this, seeing it on the news, seeing the protests in person. And we need to get better, and we need to come together and put things in place that this won't happen again.
And then Ashley Perry chiming in with, everyone thinks the police are bad until they need them. And that's, you know, when speaking to the idea of respecting, but also holding accountable when something isn't right, because, you know, every good person or group of people is capable of doing the wrong thing. That is being human, but it needs to be accounted for.
And think about just a couple years ago, when these situations would show up. Usually what you would hear from the police department or the police union was, they are on paid leave pending an internal investigation. And that whole process was not transparent at all.
Right.
They might have video or might not. We'll review it. You don't need to be involved. Now we're all involved, at least in this town, in this moment, in this discussion, with all the evidence laid bare for us to witness. I think that's a really important thing. Now, at the end, you know, as we were discussing the video yesterday, a lot of this is inconclusive, right? You know, this is going to be hard to determine. Of course, they're going to bring up the training, every step, what happened, because, you know, I've talked a lot about training yesterday, but if there was a crime that was committed with these officers, it might have to go back to training. In other words, did they make a choice independent of what they were supposed to do with their training that then got them in that
6 months to become a cop?
6 months to become a cop. That's Mason.
Imagine if we let doctors and surgeons practice after 6 months.
Right.
How many people would die?
Exactly. So Mason's pointing out maybe there's not enough training. Maybe there needs to be more. Yeah. Maybe. Exactly. So he believes that there's 6 months is not enough time to train when life and death choices are in front of you at a moment's notice.
Right.
But I will just say this again. A couple years ago, we didn't really know how this all. It just basically it would happen behind closed doors, and then that's it. They're either back on or it would go to the next step. Now we get to witness, and we have a voice, we have a say, and you know maybe these are the rules, but we don't agree with this, and things will change community by community. Because the whole point of all this is that nobody wants this to happen. This needs to stop immediately for young black men, for other races as well. I mean, it's a tragedy. Why should anyone be shot 20 times in someone's backyard when there was no gun? I mean, we get all that. That is a horrific tragedy at the start. So you have to start backing it up. And how can things be better? I know that you are mentioning race many times as that is part of the whole discussion.
It is.
And what the mayor was talking about yesterday, I know other people don't feel the same, that it's just these blanket statements we need to investigate. So you're sort of looking at it from a wider view of not getting into all that, but still trying to act like you're doing something, but maybe nothing gets done. I do think, because this happens so often, that perhaps maybe at the moment, if someone's running, having two officers go into a dark backyard, guns drawn, not knowing what's going to happen next. Just imagine that moment. Let's just start from there to there.
Okay.
If you have a chaotic moment where nobody can see anything, lots of people are going to keep dying, regardless of race. Yep. So perhaps maybe that's a moment where the rules of engagement need to be re-examined, because you know, at this moment it was Stephon Clark, but tomorrow it could be some 17-year-old kid in the backyard, you know, maybe it's graffiti or something like that. I mean, who really knows? I just know the rules of engagement seem pretty severe about going into a potentially deadly confrontation when so much murkiness and things can happen so quick when you can't really see. And they had a helicopter on the way.
And
very true.
Yeah, it was actually overhead during the whole confrontation. So, I mean, that's a key element.
Been more light provided.
And to see those unedited videos, the body cam footage, and also from the chopper, you can go to our website, abc10.com, and we'll have Chris, who works on the digital side, put it in the comments right now, the link there, so you can watch if you have not seen for yourself.
And I was going to tell you, Columbus, Ohio, two officers, they went to a domestic violence situation, and they were both killed right there. So, I mean, you have to think about that side, too, of that how they have to be protected. They went to check out a domestic violence issue, and she hung up the phone. They knocked on the door just to make sure everything was okay, and they were shot and killed in Westerville, Ohio. So I definitely feel for that side, too.
Yeah,
race relations and also the relationship that could always be better between the police force and the people of the community. And with these sort of protests, it's an opportunity to see people come together and understand each other.
I think the next thing that people are going to wonder is, will this turn out like a Michael Brown? Will this turn out like Trayvon Martin? The family just hired the attorney of those two men. The Clark family did. And what was it? Michael Brown their family walked away with $1.5 million. Tamir Rice, $6 million. People are wondering how this family is going to be compensated if, in fact, it is found out that those police overstepped their boundaries.
Right.
And so we don't know. And
the
at this
lawyer
point,
is
it's speculation, but
they have a case.
Exactly. If you're hiring that lawyer, you know that things are going to be moving in that direction.
And the fact that there is a lawyer out there who is known as, oh, he's the one that represents when black unarmed men get gunned down in America, you know we have a problem. So we'll see where this goes.
Absolutely.
But I know there's a lot of conversation surrounding this, and just going back
every
to
day.
You know, what we were experiencing yesterday when watching all of that. First, the day before yesterday, it was watching the body cam footage come out, and it was like going through that experience now, all of the transparency. Do we think there is such a thing as too much information given to people who are not trained from a police perspective?
That's a good question. But then that's just like saying social media is too much information for people, because everything is out there at your fingertips if you want it. If you want to ingest this footage, you can absorb it, you can figure it out. I think it's up to the viewer. I don't think any information is too much information. I think it's up to you whether or not you want to ingest it and figure out what that means
you are
to you.
To understand all the different perspectives and not just seeing something and then being closed-minded, because that doesn't help the cause.
If you don't have the information, it's very easy to jump to drastic conclusions that may have nothing to do with what happened in reality. So, I mean, it's very important, you know, and we may be misguided and misinformed about the process and what happened and the training and all that. Look, we don't really know. Okay, we didn't go through training, so we're just speculating on. We would like I would like to know more about that. I'm really curious on how it goes, because then once I know that information, then I can say for myself, you know what, I think that that's too much, or I think that makes sense. I don't really know.
You're an expert in the field.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a moment where we're learning more. We know now because of these body cameras. Oh my gosh, that did really happen fast.
Okay, so that's.
Oh my gosh, what if that were me? Oh my gosh. That totally didn't look like a gun, or that totally did, or I don't know. So now we're kind of put in that position to be a witness. Now we're not part of the jury. No one's been arrested. There's nothing like that. But I think we're learning more as a society about what police officers go through in that moment, and also how quickly these things happen. And I think it's understandable. And then also there's video evidence and body cams where you say, whoa, that did not need to happen.
Right.
That was a severe overreaction. This is a crime, and that's been also the case. This video body cam evidence has been introduced in court to try and prove a crime.
And that is a direct result of the protest. So I'm looking at Sharon Stafford's comment saying that not one of these protests have been productive. They've been destructive. I think that's just incorrect.
I mean,
honestly,
to
in my opinion.
She
says destructive.
Oh, destructive.
Right.
I don't think destruction, but to disrupt, oftentimes that's how you get your voice heard.
Right.
You gotta shake it up to the point where people go, oh, they, as in the protesters, have the ability to shut down Golden One Center. Not that that's a great thing for these people who have tickets, but it's a message they're trying to send.
And Chief Hahn made it very clear a year ago. They did not have the equipment to provide us with the information that we now have in this case. That's incredible. That is clearly a result of people making their needs heard.
I feel like sometimes, and I feel like, and maybe it's just because we've been on the story day after day, but I feel like that keeps getting said. And it's a great point, but it's like, yes, Chief, no, the fact that we have the body cams, yes, so that happened, okay. Let's not keep like, what next? You know what I mean?
We have to. Now it's like policy.
Now I just want to know what's next. I feel like sometimes that's a crutch for them to say, oh, we look at where we're at. Right. That's great, and I pat you on the shoulder, and I appreciate the fact that we have all the surveillance and the fact that you had 90 days and you released it in 72 hours. I do applaud that type of transparency. But what's the next thing that's going to happen to help the issue?
Right, and that's, I mean, I know it sounds like soft words from the mayor, but I mean, it really comes down to this process of how, I mean, if people are chaotically running into a situation where no one can see anything and everyone's adrenaline is running, someone's running, someone's chasing. I mean, this comes back to primal instinct sometimes. So, you know, if you ever see a car chase that ends in an orderly fashion, right? Let's just say that they're chasing, so they're in that moment. There's a suspect. There's law enforcement. They're chasing. They're weaving in and out. We're all watching. We're all engaged in that. Then the person gets flat tire and they wreck. You see what happens next when there's a moment, one moment of pause. It stopped. The car stopped. The training comes, and then it's very orderly as long as the suspect
doesn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. You can see the whole process coming out on the ground, hands behind your back, the whole thing. I would like to see a process, if at all possible, where you there's a manufactured break in the action just for 1 second. Sometimes there isn't, and it just keeps going, because then the suspect gets a chance to live, to prove that they're innocent or guilty. They get to live through the process, and the law enforcement officers never forced to do something they never wanted to do, which was to kill somebody that's unarmed.
Can I say this too about protests? Kenneth Scott in Charlotte, North Carolina. So he was a 43-year-old black male. He was killed by police officers, and it started off as a protest, but it ended in a riot. Now, I'm not putting sides, but I can tell you, watching people that I love report the news in gas masks, watching I-85, people on there and cars on fire, there is that concern as well.
Passion.
Yeah, that passion.
That could turn ugly really quick as long as leaders, and right, that's why the Black Lives Matter chapter here in Sacramento, it's a female, is at the helm of this, and Walt Gray had a chance to talk to her, and she's been very, is this me? I'm why is this my situation going on? She was very vocal, and she seems, the way she's carrying herself, it's something to respect. She's a female, and she's saying they need to stop killing black people in Sacramento or whatever city that you're in. So it's been interesting to sit back of a woman who's a Latino woman. It's my experience has been different than a black male. So I try to put myself in those shoes all the time, and it's not fun. And to hear people who have, whether it be mixed children, who have children who are black, to how they have to raise their children. Going to your point the other day, it's real conversations that are happening in real homes.
And that's what Maya Thompson is saying. So I think about, if I were to get married and have children, very likely they would be mixed and they'd be half black. And I would have to have this conversation just based off my dating history. Yeah. I would have to have this conversation with my sons if this were the case. And she's saying that as a black woman, she feels like police are out to get the black community. And it's a conversation I know we've been having every day, but you can't help but have it every day. You have to address this feeling of a lack of an uneven balance, of these scales that just can't seem to meet up, and that is how young black people feel in the presence of police officers or of figures of authority that are wielding guns. When you address that imbalance, then maybe we can come to terms with a policy that reflects a behavior from the police officers that would work for any race affected. But before that time, what are we doing?
I'm going to get to one comment. This is interesting because you guys will remember her, Cornelia Stradwick. She was our former traffic girl. She's back down in LA. And she's always been very passionate when it comes to this matter. And she has a comment for us this morning because she's watching. So hello, Cornelia. She said, sit in your car on the I-5 while they shut it down and think about people dying in your community and what you would do if it were your son. So what if you're late to your destination? That young man is dead, and that should bother you, regardless of his actions. And the reason why she's saying this, I believe that last sentiment, regardless of his actions, because people are bringing up his past and the fact that he had a criminal record and the fact that, well, why was he jumping fences and breaking into cars in the first place? Okay, so that happened, but did he deserve to have 20 shots and die?
Correct.
And that's where people would say absolutely not. Mason behind the camera as a young, a millennial white male, he's saying he's so frustrated, no, he didn't deserve to die. Okay, so if they haven't even proven if that was him, and if it was him who was in fact breaking the law and busting windows or whatnot, should he have deserved to die? And that's the whole point here. It's the over-aggression by those who have authority, in this case with guns. He didn't have a gun. They thought he had a gun according to them, but it happened to be a cell phone. So for those who are sitting there saying, well, he was a criminal in the first place, the police didn't know that in the time. They didn't know his criminal record, and they were pointing the gun and shooting him 20 times. They did not know that was Stephon Clark.
Not a clue.
So thank you, Cornelia, for chiming in.
This is where we're going to have to wrap it up.
This is where we have to wrap it up.
Yes, but your comments have been incredible. We will keep reading them, revisiting them, and commenting back to you guys. Just to let you know, we see you, we hear you. That's it. That's the end of our week, and I hope next week gets better for all of us.
Yeah.
And I hope that this conversation helped you have a conversation with maybe your kids and your family so that we can make that change that I was talking about, and so that little boys and little girls can grow up feeling a little bit safer. So have a good weekend, guys.
There you go. Have a good one. Be safe.